When a child is able to focus on a given activity for a prolonged period of time, when children are able to sit quietly without doing any mischief around, when children are able to sustain their attention in a puzzle or an activity of that sort, then it is said that the child has good attention span. And many times I see individuals working on a child's attention span even without comprehending how much of attention a child of a certain age is able to give to the task at hand, to the people around them. But what we need to focus on for early language or early language development is joint attention. Rather than focusing just on attention, we're going to talk about joint attention. So attention is anything to do with a child attending to a task, to an object, to self-play, anything of that sort is attention. Joint attention is a pre-linguistic marker. That means a marker that is set even before the child acquires language, based on how the child and the adult or the communication partner together are engaged in an event or an object in front of them. For example of joint attention, I would like to give you an example of how the adult and the child together are reading a picture book. The adult is talking to the child about the pictures in the book. They're gradually labeling one picture after the other, or they are narrating an incident or an event in that picture, and they both are having this common interest, which is that picture book. They're looking at each other. The communication partner points to a picture. The child looks at that picture. The communication partner asks the child to turn the picture. The child turns the picture, and together they are engaged in one common interest. Now, this is joint attention. Now, why do we need to work on joint attention? Is it really functional? Can't we just directly go on working with language and ask the child to say give, take, because that's functionality, right? But in order for the child to come to that point of understanding, the child should be able to sustain a certain amount of joint attention, not necessarily for a very prolonged period of time, just briefly be able to be together with a communication partner. All right, so this is why we need to work on joint attention. And this joint attention that I'm talking to you about evolves and matures in the first 2 years of life. This doesn't mean that they start working on joint attention after 2. They start acquiring joint attention even at the time or the first couple of months soon after birth. Together, if the mom says, "Where is the fan?" the infant, if stimulated right, can actually look at the fan. You can try it out, but they mature over a period of time. Even till 2 years, the child is continuing to grow and mature in joint attention. When children don't have joint attention, it can also be a marker for a risk for autism. So when a child is not able to attend together at an object or an event with the caregiver, it is hard for the child to concentrate, listen, pay attention to what the communication partner is telling to them or trying to connect with them about. Therefore, it is important for us to work on joint attention. And for kids who find it hard to get into this joint attention thing, we need to break it down into simpler units and set building blocks to acquire joint attention. So we've seen so far what joint attention is. We've seen why we need to work on joint attention. Now I'm going to talk to you about how do we work on joint attention. Joint attention has a prerequisite, and that is joint engagement. Okay, now let me explain to you what joint engagement is, and you will know why it is important. When the caregiver and the child are engaging with one another, there is no object, there's no event, the engagement is with one another. There is no complexity involved, such as having to look at an object together, sustain interest in that object or that event together. There's no need for it. That is a little more than just joint engagement. Joint engagement is much more easier for the child to acquire than joint attention, especially if there is an underlying diagnosis of autism. So the joint engagement happens between the caregiver and the child. Let me give you a few examples of some joint engagement activities. I'm going to give you at least 3 to 5 today. Let me be precise. I'll give you 3 today. You can build on it. Firstly, the child and the caregiver play games like peekaboo. When a child is laid on the caregiver's lap, or the child is made to sit in close proximity with the caregiver, and the caregiver goes peeka, 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 peekaboo. It's that suspense that brings out the interest in the child to look at the caregiver. So we can start with a simple game like peeka, peekaboo. That's number 1. Number 2, you can have the child sit on the lap. They're facing the caregiver. They're very close to one another. The caregiver is holding the child, giving enough of tactile input, and the caregiver goes up and down movement like riding a horse with the child, and they look at one another and show deep interest in each other. The caregiver has to initiate it. That is the second activity that you can do for joint engagement. The other one is involving a little bit of movement. You can do ring-a-ring-a-roses with a child, holding the child's hand and singing ring-a-ring-a-roses, and that can bring in joint engagement with the caregiver as well. I'll give you a bonus one, and that would be to do with tickling games. You can have the child lie on a sofa, lie on a bed, lie on your lap, and you go round and round the garden like a teddy bear. 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, tickle, 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 tickle. So playing games like tickling gives a lot of sensory input, which includes tactile, proprioception, vestibular, and the child is definitely going to be able to build that joint engagement with the caregiver. Okay, so here's the first building block to achieving joint attention. Right now we have achieved joint engagement. Gradually we build one after the other and move into joint attention. So how do you start working now on joint attention? You pick the child's favorite toy. It could be a dinosaur, it could be a ladle and a bowl, it could be a bowl of water, it could be a plant, it could be anything that the child likes doing or the child is interested in. And how do you build the joint attention? Not by forcing the child to look at you, not by forcing the child to do what you want them to do, but instead, you look at where the child is looking at. You do what the child is looking at. If the child is looking at a leaf, you go near the child, have your hands around the child, and you look at the leaf too. And maybe you can touch the leaf and say, wow, what a beautiful green leaf it is. And look at the child to see if they would look at you. And even if the child doesn't look at you, if the child is still continuing to look at that leaf, it's an indicator that they are interested in that conversation. They've not seen you as a threat. Then you can talk a little more about the leaf or get them another leaf. And if the child is holding the leaf in the hands and rolling it between their thumb and their index finger, you could take another leaf and do the same. In that way, you're not asking the child to step out of his comfort zone into your zone. Instead, you are stepping into the child's zone and being with the child, right? There's a big difference when we do that. And when you start showing interest in what interests the child is going to eventually give you their trust. And once they've given you their trust, you have a whole lot of things that you can work together with your child. It could be reading a book together, playing with a toy car together, having a ladle and a bowl, and pretending you're mixing something which is not even there in the bowl. Seeing what interests your child, that is critical. And when you use these building blocks to build the joint attention, eventually you can start introducing flashcards, objects, or anything that you want in terms of speech and language intervention to build two-way communication, interaction. So when you think of pre-linguistic skills and attention span as a goal, don't overemphasize on the child sitting and completing a puzzle piece, child sitting and completing, stacking rings like a big stack of rings. Don't focus on that. As a speech language pathologist, our focus should constantly be around communication. So you need to give more importance to joint attention. I hope this video has helped you understand how we work on joint attention, why we work on it. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video, and I'll see you in another video soon.